Look, Sterling, you're on a shirt. Okay. Good morning, Reptilians. Welcome and welcome back to the channel. This week we are joined by Sterling, who wanted to get out of his tank, and then I looked over and one of his tank clips are missing, so he's hanging out with me for right now until I finish this and I can find that clip. Anyway, this week we're doing a video that's been suggested multiple times and I'm not really sure why I haven't done it sooner. I just kind of forgot, but we're talking about reptiles that can live in small spaces. So this video we are talking about 20 gallons or less. This is not one of those animals. Now, I'm not saying that these animals have to go in small spaces, just that their minimum care requirements are small spaces. So they could live in these small tanks for forever. So if you have a very small space to put a reptile, or maybe you have a smaller tank just laying around that you upgraded another animal from, these animals are perfect for those situations. Before we get started, this video is sponsored by Gecko, so make sure to stay until the end of the video to find out all about this awesome company. Let's get started. The first reptile on the list is a reptile that flew under my radar for so long until I recently got one, and now I just can't get enough of them. They're amazing. That's cave geckos. Cave geckos require a very small amount of space. They don't get super big, staying at about 8 to 9 inches, but they also are not incredibly active. These guys like to hide a lot. I've seen mine like 3 times, and I've had her for 4 or 5 months now. It's been a while. I don't see her often. The bare minimum tank size for these guys is a 10 gallon, but I suggest maybe going up to a 20 gallon so they can have a bit more room. Like I said, they're not super active. You don't ever see them, but they might be exploring out at night. We don't know. These guys require a whole lot of humidity, but that's really all they require. They are very happy in the low 70s. So at room temperature, anything above the 80s can actually cause them to overheat and they could become very seriously injured or die. So we don't want to give them any kind of high temperatures, but that just makes them easier. They're also completely nocturnal, meaning that they don't need UVB light either. They won't even come out in the daytime to take in any UVB, so they just don't need it. This is very easily one of the most low maintenance reptiles that I have, if not the most low maintenance, and as long as you can keep up with the humidity, these guys are actually really good for beginners. Next up is the Ocelot Gecko. I don't think I've ever talked about this gecko on this channel. It is also known as the Pictus gecko. It is also known as the Pictus ground gecko. This is such an adorable little gecko all the way from Madagascar. These are not an animal that you see all too often. Not a lot of people have these, I feel like, but they're actually not too difficult to find. They're currently available from both Josh's Frogs and Supreme Gecko, and they're very inexpensive too, ranging from about $35 to $50, which is fantastic. I'm not sure why more people don't have these. I'm not sure why I don't have one of these. These guys stay pretty small, only about 4 to 6 inches, so their minimum cage requirement is also a 10-gallon tank, but a 20-gallon would give them a little bit more room. They are also nocturnal, which means that they don't need any special lighting, and they do require a hot spot, but not too hot at about 90 degrees Fahrenheit. Somewhat similar to the fat-tailed gecko. They also, on top of that, require just a little bit of humidity, but not too much, and they're insectivores, so the only thing that they're going to eat is bugs. That means no worrying about chopping up salads. They do have a little bit more intensive of care requirements, needing heat and humidity, but I feel like they would be a cute, unique pet if that's what you're looking for. Electric blue day geckos. These guys are so pretty. Before we even get into it, these guys are very rare. They are... What are you hissing at? The plants? You don't like the plants? You're not a fan of them? Okay. Now, before we even get started with these guys, they are very rare. These guys are actually critically endangered in the wild, but there are efforts to captive breed them, a lot like what happened with crested geckos, and bring those numbers up so that they don't go extinct. Josh's Frogs is one of these people that are currently out of stock, but they are working on captive breeding these guys. Other geckos could also go in the spot, like the gold dust day gecko and the peacock day gecko, but I just wanted to put this one specifically because this is another one that I've never talked about on the channel, and just look at them. I didn't find out about these guys until pretty recently. A couple of months back, my father-in-law actually sent me a picture of one of these, and so immediately I had to hurry up and do research, and it did not disappoint. I love them so much. They are so beautiful. Now, this is a species that is not good for beginners. I know that I very often say that any species can be a beginner species if you're wanting to do the research. This guy isn't necessarily the best for beginners, and that's because they are not a hardy animal. They are not very forgiving if you make mistakes, and making a mistake in these guys' tanks can be fatal for them. They need a very high humidity, like bioactive level high humidity, so they're great for bioactive tanks. They also need UVB light because they are day geckos, and they also need heat. They need a hot spot of about 95 degrees Fahrenheit, which is pretty high for a little gecko. There is an issue, like I said before, of them not being captive bred. These guys in the past have been heavily imported, and that's one of the reasons that they're currently critically endangered. So if you happen to find one of these, please make sure it is a captive bred electric blue day gecko, because we want to help the endangered situation with these guys, not hurt it. Next up, we have the Rosy Boa. This guy appears on my top reptiles and top snakes for beginners list because they are a small snake, so they don't need a lot of space like these guys. These snakes stay small, only getting to about 2 to 3 feet. Male Rosy Boas are going to be fantastic in a 20-gallon tank. Some things say 10 to 15 gallons. I say 20 for these guys, but the males stay much smaller than the females. Females can get a little bigger, and then they would of course require a bigger tank than a 20-gallon. So for the Rosy Boa, we're gonna say a male Rosy Boa is going to be perfect in a small space. These are snakes, so you just feed them a rodent once a week, once every 2 weeks, and they're good to go. Like with all snakes, these guys need a lot of enrichment and a lot of places to hide and feel secure so that you can see it out and about more. But they do have a very good temperament. They do not mind being handled at all, and they're pretty good eaters. Their basking spot does not have to be high at only about 90 degrees, and they don't have any special humidity requirements. They actually don't like a lot of humidity, but if they're shedding, you can throw a shed box, a humid box in there to help them out with that. These guys are absolutely fantastic for beginners and absolutely fantastic if you don't have a lot of space and you want a snake. Next up, we have Mourning Geckos. Mourning Geckos, I feel like, have exploded in popularity lately for a few different reasons. Most of them being that these guys are just awesome. Mourning Geckos are tiny. You can have 2 to 3 of these in a 10-gallon tank. 2 to 3 of them. That means that you can cohab Mourning Geckos. This is an exception to most of the rules in the reptile world where reptiles will eat each other. Mourning Geckos are actually very docile, and it actually can cause health deterioration and mental health deterioration if these guys are kept by themselves, which is so crazy. Such a big thing in the reptile world. You can cohab these in a very small tank, and you can cohab these with dart frogs. So not only am I advocating for cohabbing a reptile, but I'm also advocating for cohabbing different species in the same tank, because these guys can also do that. And I keep saying these guys, all Mourning Geckos are girls, all of them. So they actually breed by a process called parthenogenesis, which basically means that they don't need male geckos. They have the babies themselves and just reproduce other geckos. These guys are super amazing. They are fantastic for bioactive tanks. They need very high humidity, much the same care as dart frogs, and that's why they work so fantastically together. So if you want a beautiful bioactive setup with multiple animals, you want 3 little Mourning Geckos and a little colony of dart frogs and waterfalls and beautifulness, you can throw these guys in a 20-gallon tank and have all of those things. Or you can just have a small colony of these guys by themselves in a 10-gallon tank. These guys are awesome. Next up, we have the Leopard Gecko. Now, even though these guys come in very, very high on the best beginner pets list, these are kind of low on this list. That is because while a 20-gallon long is bare minimum for a Leopard Gecko, a lot of Leopard Geckos are really active, and I feel like they should be given a little more than that. But with that being said, one of my Leopard Geckos is in a 20-gallon tank. Minimum requirement for these guys is a 20-gallon, which years ago it used to be a 10-gallon, and it has gone up. So if you want to keep your Leopard Gecko in a 20-gallon, they're fantastic for small spaces. Like I said, these guys come up on all the beginner lists because they're so easy. They're easy to care for. They have a fantastic temperament most of the time. There's always exceptions. They don't require too much once you get their tank set up with the hot spot of about 90. It is recommended to give them a UVB light because they are crepuscular. Definitely make sure to do a lot of research into their care before getting one, but these guys make such fantastic, very easy, adorable pets. They come in so many different colors. There's so many different morphs of these guys. So if you want an orange reptile or you want a solid white reptile with the best personality, Leopard Geckos might be the pet for you. And the last one on this list is the smooth green snake. Smooth green snakes are so cool. Not to be confused with rough green snakes. They look almost exactly the same, but rough green snakes get a couple feet bigger. Smooth green snakes only stay at between 1 and 2 feet. They have super sweet personalities. They are so incredibly active, leaping from branch to branch, vine to vine, and they're a bright green color. They're so beautiful. These guys can also live in a 10 to 20 gallon tank, 10 being the minimum, 20 being a better option to give them a little bit more space. But this is a diurnal snake, so you're gonna see this guy moving around in the daytime. This does mean that they need UVB lighting and that they do need a hot spot. The issue with smooth green snakes, the reason that they are the very last one on this list, is that they are almost always wild caught. Finding a captive bred one of these is very difficult. I have seen one person on Craigslist one time who was captive breeding green snakes and selling them one time. And wild caught green snakes don't do very well in captivity. A lot of the time, like a vast majority of the time, they tend to just not eat. They will starve themselves in captivity, even though they're super active, they're jumping around, they look super healthy. They just won't eat. Make sure if you get one of these, you are getting a captive bred. Another positive thing about these snakes is that they're insectivores. So if you want a snake and you don't want to feed rodents, these guys eat solely insects. So if you can find a captive bred smooth green snake, you have a very small amount of room and you don't like to feed rodents to your snakes, or you just think that this snake looks really cool, this might be the perfect snake for you. And I do have one honorable mention for this list. It is an honorable mention because it's not going to fit in a 20-gallon tank, but I feel like it is important to note, and that is the Rankin's dragon. You know that bearded dragons bare minimum is 40-gallon, but most of the time it is very much better to get them much more space. If you don't have room for a 55, 75, 150-gallon tank for a bearded dragon and you really want a bearded dragon, a Rankin's dragon might be just what you're looking for. These guys are comfortable in a 40-gallon breeder. They stay much smaller than bearded dragons, but their care requirements are exactly the same as bearded dragons. They are a little more pricey at about $150, and they are a little harder to find, but Tiki's Geckos gets them sometime. I think on the website it said that they were going to have some next month. So even though this doesn't stay in a super small space, I wanted to add it to the list for those bearded dragon enthusiasts that just don't have enough room to properly give their bearded dragon a very large tank. That is it. That is all the animals I have on this list. There are a lot more animals out there that can live in smaller tanks. I just didn't want to make an hour-long video. So if you know of any other animals that can go in super small tanks, leave them down below so that you can help someone else out. As I said at the beginning of this video is sponsored by Geckos. Geckos is an awesome company that makes conversion kits for old tanks that you may have laying around to convert them into front opening tanks. They have vertical versions of this and horizontal versions. Some of these animals on this list would be perfect to go into one of these tanks. These conversion kits provide a very affordable way to make a really nice tank for your animal, and having a front opening tank makes your animal feel safer because you're not reaching down at them like a predator. Instead, you're reaching to them to grab them at eye level or to give them food or whatever it is that you need to do. They feel less threatened. These tanks also provide fantastic ventilation, so if you want to set up a bioactive setup in that enclosure, you most certainly can. Make sure if you order one of these awesome conversion kits from iHeartGeckos.com, you put Elle's Reptiles in the How Did You Hear About Us box so they know that you guys are coming from here. Thank you so much to iHeartGeckos for sponsoring this video. As always, if you have not already, please feel free to follow me on my other socials and like, subscribe, and hit that bell for notifications every single time I put out a new video, which is every Sunday and some Wednesdays. This week's Instagram shout out is for Wadey Ragu for following me on Instagram and going through and liking a whole bunch of my stuff. And this week's subscriber shout out is for Luna Geckos for commenting on last week's video. Thank you guys both so much. You are the bee's knees. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you have a fantastic day. Bye. Clap, clap. Okay, that might work. I only have one hand. I'll hold you like this. Is that okay? Can you hold on? You want it out, and now you don't want to. This is attacking me. Okay. I redecorated. I got tired of the Halloween thing, and I brought a bunch of plants in here. Whoop. Is that your head? I'm so sorry. Available at both joshsfrogs.com and creamgecko.com. They are currently available from some people like snakes more than lizards, and so all of the other ones on this list don't apply. I don't know. Females can get a little bigger and then would require Mickey's. I'm gonna just. He's so big. Say bye, Sterling. Say bye. Say bye, Sterling. Bye.